The day I arrived at the cabin with my wife was supposed to feel like the perfect start to a quiet summer. The sun was dipping toward the ridge line, casting a warm golden glow across the pine trees that stood like sentinels around the gravel driveway. The air up here always smelled clean, pine needles, earth, and that faint sweetness you only get in the mountains after a warm day. My truck crunched over the gravel as I pulled in, and for a moment I just sat there, taking in the view of the cabin. It wasn't fancy. Wooden siding faded from decades of sun, a roof I'd patched myself last year, and a front porch with a swing my grandfather had built long before I was born. This place was more than just property, it was family history. My wife looked out the passenger window with a tired smile. She had been away for months on deployment, and I could see how much she needed this break. Her hair was tied back in that effortless way she always wore it when traveling, and she still carried herself with that same posture, straight back, head high, that said she'd seen and done more than most people could imagine. We stepped out of the truck, and the gravel gave way under our boots. The breeze carried the sound of distant birdsong, and for a few minutes, we just enjoyed the quiet. I opened the tailgate and started unloading the bags, passing her the smaller ones while I took the heavier duffels. We were talking about what to cook for dinner when I caught a flicker of movement at the corner of my vision. Down the road, moving slow but deliberate, was a white golf cart with a little green wall logo stenciled on the side. Even from a distance, I could tell who it was. I'd been warned about her by the neighbors the last time I came up here, Sharon, the self-appointed sheriff of the Homeowners Association. They said she took her role more seriously than most people took their careers, patrolling the neighborhood with a clipboard in one hand and a phone in the other. The way she eyed people's lawns, paint colors, and guest lists made her sound like a hawk hunting for violations. And now here she was, heading straight for us, the tires of her golf cart crunching on the road like she had all the time in the world. My wife noticed her too and gave me a questioning look. I just shook my head slightly, as if to say, here we go. The golf cart slowed to a crawl as it reached the driveway. Sharon didn't bother to wave or smile. She just stopped at the edge of the property and looked at us like we were strangers trespassing on land that wasn't ours. Her sunglasses reflected the sunlight, hiding her eyes, but I could feel the judgment radiating from her. "Afternoon," I said, forcing politeness into my voice. She didn't return the greeting. Instead, she tilted her head toward my wife and said, "Is she registered with the WA?" The question hit me like a rock thrown out of nowhere. My wife raised her eyebrows, clearly caught off guard. "I'm his wife," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We're just getting settled." That should have been enough to end it, but Sharon's lips tightened, and she leaned forward on the steering wheel like she was sniffing out trouble. "All permanent residents must be registered," she said, tapping her clipboard. "It's in the guidelines." I set down the bag I was carrying and took a step closer, not aggressive, just making sure my words landed. "This cabin was built by my grandfather before the wall even existed. It's not bound by most of your rules. We're here legally." That didn't seem to matter to her. She glanced at my wife again, and something about the way she looked her over made my jaw clench. "Well, I'll need to verify that," Sharon said finally, in a tone that suggested she thought she'd caught us doing something wrong. My wife gave me a look that said she wanted to be anywhere but here, but she stayed composed. Sharon pulled out her phone and muttered something about unapproved occupancy as she drove off, her golf cart buzzing softly until it disappeared around the bend. I tried to shake it off. This was supposed to be a peaceful place. We carried the rest of the bags inside, the wooden steps creaking under our weight, and started unpacking. But the air felt heavier now, like a storm cloud was forming somewhere just out of sight. Neither of us said it, but we both knew that wasn't the last we'd see of her. It didn't take long for Sharon to prove that she wasn't the type to let something go. Barely 2 hours after she'd driven off in her little white golf cart, the sound of tires on gravel pulled me out of my unpacking. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor stopping by to say hello, but when I stepped out onto the porch, I saw the unmistakable blue and red flicker of police lights cutting through the trees. 2 cruisers eased up the driveway, their engines low but steady, and behind them, standing at the roadside like a proud commander who'd summoned reinforcements, was Sharon. Her arms were crossed, clipboard gone but self-satisfaction written all over her face. My wife stepped out behind me, brow furrowing. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she already knew this had Sharon's fingerprints all over it. The officers climbed out of their cars, both looking around with the cautious expression of men who had no idea what they were walking into. One of them, a tall guy with a neatly trimmed beard, approached me and said, "Sir, we got a call about a possible trespassing situation." I almost laughed, but I caught myself. This wasn't the time for sarcasm. "Trespassing," I said, my voice low. "This is my property. Been in my family for 3 generations." The second officer, a younger guy with a notepad in hand, glanced over at Sharon. She stepped forward, putting on that sugary tone that people like her use when they're trying to seem reasonable while causing trouble. "Officers, I just wanted to make sure the neighborhood is safe. This man's wife showed up today, but I've never seen her before, and she's not registered with the law." When I tried to talk to her, she was confrontational. My wife's eyes narrowed, but she stayed silent, letting me handle it. I looked at the officers, then at Sharon, and felt that familiar frustration building in my chest. "Confrontational," I said. "You asked if my wife was registered like she was a stray dog. She told you she's my wife. That was it." The older officer's brow furrowed, and I could see him putting the pieces together. "Ma'am," he said to Sharon, "being a spouse doesn't require any kind of law registration under the law. That's a civil matter, not criminal." Sharon's lips tightened again, like she'd bitten into something sour. I was about to suggest we wrap this up when my wife quietly stepped forward. She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet, flipping it open to reveal her military ID. The younger officer's expression changed instantly, his posture straightened, his tone softened. "Ma'am," he said, handing it back respectfully, "thank you for your service." The older officer gave a small nod of acknowledgement too. I turned just in time to see Sharon's face lose some of its color. She looked at my wife like she was seeing her for the first time, and maybe in a way, she was. This wasn't just some unregistered occupant. In her little book of neighborhood rules, this was someone who had served the country, someone whose discipline and quiet authority made Sharon's petty power plays look microscopic. The officers, clearly ready to be done with the whole mess, asked if there was anything else they needed to address. I shook my head, and so did my wife. Sharon hesitated, like she wanted to say something, but all that came out was a weak, "I was just trying to follow the guidelines." The older officer gave her a polite but firm, "That's not a police matter, ma'am," before walking back to his cruiser. Within a couple of minutes, they were pulling out of the driveway, their tires crunching over the same gravel that had welcomed us earlier that day. Sharon lingered a moment longer, her hands twitching at her sides like she couldn't decide whether to retreat or fire off one last comment. In the end, she said nothing. She turned, walked briskly to her golf cart, and drove away without looking back. My wife and I stood there for a while, watching the dust settle in the evening light. She slid her ID back into her wallet, her face calm, almost unreadable, and said, "Well, that was a waste of police resources." I couldn't help but grin. "Maybe for them," I said, "but I think it just made you 10 times harder for her to mess with." We headed back inside, but I knew this wasn't over, not with someone like Sharon. People who thrive on control don't like losing it, and something told me she'd be back, one way or another.